Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of the Weekly Wealth Podcast. My name is David Chuddick, and I am a certified financial planner with Parallel Financial. But this week, we're taking a little break from money, and we're going to talk about something else that might even be a little bit more important than money. We're talking about health, and it's just awesome to have Michael Ricchio on this week's episode with us. We're going to talk about some things that we can all do to increase our health, because let's face it, health is wealth, right? So, hey, Michael, how's it going?
It's going great, David. Thanks for having me on.
Awesome. This is exciting. I actually went to the Y during lunch today. So I found some time to go lift some weights and work on my own personal health, which is sometimes hard to do. But yeah, tell me a little bit about your business, your background, and what you do for clients to help them in their health journey.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I'm Mike Ricchio. I am the owner of Mar Health and Performance, which is a 6,000 square foot health and fitness facility just outside of the Chicago land area in Illinois. So my background, I've been a trainer and coach for about 16 years. My degree is in exercise science, so I'm an exercise physiologist by degree. And in my career, I've kind of jumped around a bit. I've worked with professional athletes, which I still do, and I've worked in rehabilitation and working hand in hand with physical therapists. And I've worked a lot in management of fitness. So, my background has brought me to this point where I felt confident in starting my own business. And that's what I do now, where I work with the general population, adults between the ages of 35 and 70, as well as a spectrum of athletes from high school through professional.
Well, that's awesome. The exercise physiologists of the world have a special place in my heart because I married a cute little blonde one. So, so you're definitely not the prettiest exercise physiologist that I know. So no offense there, but she has you beaten. So,
I'm sure I'm very far down on the list, and that's okay.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, tell me, like health, it's one of those things that we just sometimes, I don't know if we feel guilty about taking time. Like there was part of me that was like, hey, do I really have time to go to the Y and get like a quick 25-minute workout and be in and out of the office in an hour? Like there's part of you that's guilty. Like, why do we put ourselves and our health on the back burner? I mean, you're a dude, you're a dad, you own a business, and you look like you're pretty ripped, but you probably, do you have some of that as well?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I do. And, David, I think there's two parts. I think one, we really do feel busy. We really do have a task list, a to-do list. We do know that our businesses, our work, our kids are important, and we really do want to spend time there. But the honest truth is there is a second part of it that likes to, at least subconsciously, justify not getting to the gym, not eating right, not planning for our health and fitness and nutrition. And I don't think we do it on purpose. I don't think we do it maliciously to ourselves. But in a world of choices, I do think it's also the easier choice, even though it makes us feel selfless, to put ourselves on the back burner and start focusing on other things.
Back in my 30s, I ran 4 marathons and I was like a 3:47 guy. So that's really good to the general competition, but there are people that beat you by an hour and a half. But like for a quote regular person, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
So back in 18, I guess I was 45. I was like, you know what? I'm going to run another marathon. And, I'm not going to probably not going to beat my time from the olden days, and you talk to people and it's interesting. People say, well, ooh, I could never do that, or I don't have time to run 30 minutes a day. And everybody has different amounts of talent, of resources, of everything, but we all have the same amount of time. So I watched very little TV for 9 months and I just got it done. But I also was very much more efficient at the office because I knew I had to be. So, do you think that when you're a little bit more focused on your health, you can be showing up in the other parts of your life a little bit better as well?
Yes, I do. It was Bill Gates that said, the only thing he can't buy is time. And I agree. Time is a finite number. However, I do think time is moldable. And I think, like you just said, I think when we just start adding things in, like you did your marathon training, we realize that other things just tend to adjust. We start becoming more efficient in other places, or items of our life that really didn't need to be there tend to work themselves out, even if the intention wasn't originally for them to work themselves out. So yes, absolutely. I think that's true.
Well, and you said the word intention. And one of my favorite words with regard to success in any parts of our life is intentionality. Nobody ever got financially extremely successful and stayed there without intention. I mean, yes, you could inherit money, but if you're not intentional, the money will go. Nobody ever got ripped and very healthy. Now, of course, genetics come into play. Some people are leaner than others, and you can't necessarily change that. But to be the best that you can be takes intentionality. And in your marriage, and as a father, you have to be intentional. And that is resource management, I think, to an extent. And time is a huge, huge resource, I believe.
Yes. And to go back to a point you just made, if you don't mind, genetics are a factor, and I will never say they are not. However, they are not the crutch that we sometimes make them. And genetics, I like to call them they can be the gas pedal or the brake, just like our habits can be, where they can slow certain things down and make things harder, or for some people, make things a lot easier. However, very rarely are our genetics a complete stop sign, like we tend to try to make them to be.
So I've always enjoyed exercising, and I've always almost considered that my talent, as far as, I was never going to bench press 500 pounds. I was never going to outrun anybody at a world-class pace. But, for a regular dude, I've always been a good athlete. And I always thought that kind of my talent was the fact that I liked doing it. And I don't know if that's even a genetic type quality. Then you get to the other end. And I don't know if people talk themselves into, I hate working out, or if it is a crutch, or do some people, does the pain of doing a bicep curl feel worse to some people than others?
Yes, it does. And David, were you an athlete growing up?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So people that engaged in playful exercise throughout life, their body has just experienced the benefit, and it is not as new. What people fall out of love with is the temporary sensation of being uncomfortable. And the truth is, if we are someone that has come from 1 to 10 years of inactivity, physiologically speaking, the body's going to see it as foreign. And in the short term, it is going to be uncomfortable, which the brain might pick up as pain. Mm-hmm. Now, I think a common mistake with that is people also jump into, they go right from 0 to 60, to use the car analogy. We don't go from 0 to 10. We don't start just taking walks. We don't start with some light exercise. When you start people the right way, that hatred, we can start taking that away. And before you know it, the body starts getting to what everybody gets to, which is liking movement. There isn't a human body on the world that does not like movement. It is how we are made to release dopamine. It is why we have the triggers to go get food. It is why we're made to move. The key is getting people who are too removed from it going at the right speed, so to not create that negative perception of it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's almost one of the reasons why I haven't jumped into CrossFit, is because I'm too freaking competitive, and I would do things that would literally tear my shoulder off trying to compete with guys who've been doing it for 10 years that are 20 years younger. So I actually taught tennis back in my 20s, and I took about 18 years off, kids and soccer and everything else. And I took that back up a couple of years ago. And that's just been just the agility and just the problem solving mentally. It's just really therapy for me. And I think we all need to find that form of exercise that is mental therapy. I did a lot of running, a lot of cycling as well. And I solved a lot of the world's problems on 50-mile bike rides.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the point you just made. You have to find what you like. Mm-hmm. And I think people are force feeding, square pegs into round holes too often, because this is how my friend lost their weight, or this is how so-and-so from the office did this. The movement really is the key. Unless you're getting into bodybuilding or getting to specificity of sport and athletics, that's when things become a little more in need of those specifics.
Yeah.
But
you're in your mid 30s on up. You just don't want to have boobs if you're a dude. I mean, honestly, you got to move. Right. A couple things you could probably do that can help you,
especially at the start. And then, yes, absolutely. Are there certain ratios that you work better than others? Do we need strength training versus cardio? Yes. And yes, we do. But if you're going to start in a way that starts to discredit exercise, where you're not going to stick with it anyway, the perfect ratio no longer matters. The perfect diet doesn't exist, because if we don't stick with it, it's no longer the perfect diet. So it's whatever you can actually do and do consistently at the beginning is what's important. And just like time, things are moldable, things are pliable. Your activity will naturally start to shift because now that you put it into your life and you did something that you were able to do 3, 4, 5 hours a week. Well, now the time slot is created. So now what we do within those 3, 4 to 5 hours, now that can start to change, start fitting what maybe the fitness world deems an ideal ratio of activity. But I don't think that's anyone's first battle, but unfortunately, that's usually where people go first.
Okay. No, I totally get it. Totally get it. So you have this 5-pillar model that I think is pretty interesting. So maybe we could take, just a minute or two, talk about each of the pillars, why they're important, how, maybe what some of the common pitfalls are of, again, your 35 to 50, 60-year-old people that are, we're not world-class athletes, but we still need to maintain our health. But we do have kids. We do have kids that are on travel soccer. We are running businesses. Maybe we have, demanding jobs. So, until you're making millions as an athlete, your job is not, your pro athletes that you work with, their job is their body. They have to spend 40 hours a week on it or more. I can't. So talk to me about those 5 pillars.
Yeah, absolutely. And even with my athletes, we teach these pillars from high school on. Before that, I have a youth program here too, because once sports are done, this should still be a factor in your life. So we teach it on early on as a lesson. The pillar analogy, is not proprietary by any means for us. People have used the idea of what holds up a house and what a good support system is before. We see a lot of 3 and 4 pillars. I use 5, and the 5 pillars I use are exercise, which is planned movement for a task; general activity, which is everything outside of that planned movement. The body still needs to move in general. And there's really good research on people that exercise at a high intensity, an hour a day, but do nothing for the other 23 hours, still having high levels of triglycerides, high levels of risk factors towards longevity and dementia and diabetes. And unfortunately, we're missing out on that. So
not to interrupt you, but I gained weight training for a marathon because, you do your 2-3 hour run, then you tell yourself you need to replenish, and then you sit on the couch for 7 hours. So some of that I think is not natural. I think maybe just a shorter run and just doing some gardening or just regular, just human activity would be more healthy, other than kind of the goal of running the marathon.
You're absolutely right. And that's exactly what separates you training for the sport that you did versus people that get into marathon running because they assume the activity will also lead to the byproduct of weight loss. And that's exactly what it is. I just retested an athlete who just got out of his football season, a local quarterback, and he put on 2% of body fat during the season. Now, he was a very lean kid. For him, this isn't a big increase, but the truth is the body's protective too. And fat is a way that we protect our organs. So impacting of steps like in marathon and impact sport like football or rugby or soccer, even, football, all of those tend to see players that outside of the Ronaldos of the world that don't always stay very lean, especially the more high impact positions. So that's a great point. The other 3 pillars are nutrition, sleep, and stress. And stress is the big one that, we make sure we're dealing with it within the scope of our practice. I don't have any psychiatrists or counselors on staff, but there are ways to deal with stress outside of those avenues. Breathing, lower intensity workouts, sleep in itself, eating correctly are actually forms of de-stressing in of themselves, but it's still a separate pillar because it is important. And there are emotional stressors that are sometimes out of our control.
Okay. I don't know. Marty Fish was a top 10 tennis player in the world, and he has a documentary out on, it's either Amazon or Netflix, and he went through some serious mental struggles. And, to the point where he had breakdowns. He's very open about his mental struggles. And he finally said, I can't fight this. It's not a sign of weakness if I drop out of the tour for a while. Number one, the average person doesn't know what we being top pro athletes go through, and how much work and just dedication. And number 2, you're not weak or bad if you're not number 1 in the world. There's only number one, and he got help. And, he kind of talked about he may have killed himself if things didn't get help. So that de-stressing is incredibly important.
Simone Biles is another example of someone who just recently Olympics got so much, slack for her decision to step away. And
from
I'm on
people who are overweight sitting on their couches that have never competed at a high level.
100%. But yet who feel stressed. So they're hypocrites in two
Sure.
ways.
Mm-hmm.
But I was completely on the support bandwagon for her, because the amount of stress and pressure she is on, that does not make her less of a pro athlete. That is real. And the idea of her losing her proprioception when in midair, in the middle of a flip, and now it's physically dangerous.
Potential death.
That's
exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. Paralysis, and that's the worst case. The best case scenario is she loses it for her team, which is also, in the grand scheme of things, as a pro athlete, a terrible thing. So to be able to step away and say, I'm going to let one of my teammates step in for me, I think was a very selfless and courageous act. Just to give another example. And I think that ties into where these pillars come in and how they affect each other. And really, that's the point of having this analogy. If we have 5 pillars that hold up our house or our skyscraper, whatever, how dramatic you want to be in the analogy, the body is typically okay when a pillar goes down. We are resilient. The body is resilient. What we have to watch out for is this domino effect, where the loss of one pillar becomes a loss of 2, becomes a loss of 3, becomes a loss of 4. Excuse me. So when I was doing more public speaking before the pandemic, I was working with a local well-known hospital, and I was doing continuing education events for physicians. And it was for them. It was partially for their health, and these are medical professionals. But what I used to do was I used to fill up a balloon before the presentation, and I had it behind the podium, and I'd bring it up. And at the very end of the presentation, for a visual, I'd have one person come up and say, okay, you are stressed. Okay, so I want you to squeeze this balloon for me. So they squeeze the balloon, they keep squeezing. I'd say, now because you're stressed, and I call the second person up and say, now because you are stressed, you're emotionally eating negatively. So now your nutrition pillar is down. The second person can come and squeeze this balloon for me. You can see where this goes.
I'm a stress eater. Mm-hmm.
So now you're stress eating. So now your body's inflamed, you're lethargic. Now, do you want to work out? Probably not. So now that third person comes up and they squeeze, because now exercise is off the table. So you can see where the analogy goes. Now, when you get to the last pillar and this balloon is about to pop, and you ask the fifth person to come up and say, hey, can you come squeeze a balloon? Everyone's hands go down. There's no more volunteers because that balloon's about to go. But that's us. We push and we let every pillar go down. And unfortunately, we don't start backtracking and thinking about these things again until we are about ready to blow, or we do blow, which is when, God forbid, the heart attacks of the world come in, or disease states come in, or just a high blood pressure diagnosis kicks in. Or maybe it's one step before that. Maybe it's you realize you're blowing up at your kids because you don't have the patience to take the 2 seconds, and you're talking to a toddler every day, and now you're spending every day yelling, and your relationship with your wife isn't as good. There's so many.
You hit the bottle then maybe because you're to make the quote make the problems go away. You drink too much, and it all spirals. No, I totally get it.
Absolutely,
for sure.
Yeah, and how often did you hear that? And sorry, in the pandemic though, that was a big one. Everyone, how many people didn't say, "Oh, we started drinking because we were sitting at home,"
Yeah.
And so,
well, 2 things, and I won't get on a political soapbox, but 0 politicians. I don't care who you voted for, but no politician said, "Okay, COVID's here. It's a horrible, horrible thing. We should wear masks. We should social distance." But none of them said, and we should all drop 10 pounds, 20 pounds. And while we're not working, let's stay away from each other. But let's walk around the block with our kids. Let's do 10 push-ups. Let's do 1 push-up if that's all you can do. No politician said that we should lose weight. And this could have jump-started. And instead, where I live, they actually closed down the hiking trails. So you literally could not go hiking in the mountains, which what's more therapeutic on a beautiful day, hiking in the mountains with your family? They were literally closed. So, what happened? The COVID-19, virus put on 19 pounds for everybody.
For everybody. And that's exactly right. And I agree. I won't go down the political path, but I do agree that there was definitely an opportunity for us to not only say, here's the science for the pandemic, and
no question,
people take what they want out of that. That's their choice. And I won't get into that. But there's also, they had this opportunity to say people are vulnerable. Let's get them on their health a little better. Yeah. But there's other factors, I guess, in those messages.
Sure, no, there's no question. But especially the first time around, this first virus, I think it was a scientific fact that the heavier people suffered much bigger consequences.
Without a doubt.
Can't control that, but you can control if you eat a little bit less and lose a half pound a week. So, but we'll get off that. But kind of going back to those pillars, think about we are the Weekly Wealth Podcast, so we do talk about money. Think about a time in your life where maybe money was tight, or your money was not properly controlled, or maybe there's some bill, or your receivables just weren't where they needed to be. Now you get home, now you kick the dog because you're stressed, and maybe not as nice to your wife as you should be. And there's kind of one of the pillars as well. So our money, our relationships, our health, our spiritual health, they all work together. And I love the pillar model that you have for health, but you can almost expand that to other areas of your life. And let's say I make it to where I'm incredibly financially successful, but I gave up everything. I never got to my kids' games. I didn't exercise, so now I'm severely overweight, and then I died too young. None of it's worth it. So we need to have balanced lives. And that's kind of a big part of this podcast, is having a better life, primarily through how you handle your money, but also your health and your relationships. So,
yes. Well, to share a personal story on that, because that hit very close to home. My father died of a brain tumor in 2013. And he was a police officer. He was still chief of police of a small local police station when he passed away. Our entire lives, he worked 4 jobs. He rarely slept, and he did what it took to put food on the table and make sure we were lived in a safe neighborhood and went to good schools, and God bless him for it. But he lived the exact life you just said. And you can't talk me out of my opinion that his lifestyle led him to that tumor. Now, could there be other factors? Of course there could. I'm not a doctor, but was it a factor? You really can't convince me otherwise that it wasn't. So, I have one of those very near passionate examples that does motivate me every day to try to find a better balance, because I watched someone who didn't have a good balance, who didn't make it to a lot of our stuff, who we wouldn't see until Saturday afternoon, until Sunday morning every week. And that was it, because he was gone before we woke up every day, and he got home every night after we went to bed. And that was every night.
Yeah, very admirable, but probably just too much, right? And we all need to know when to stop being so admirable. And that is a balance with guys, is we need to work hard, and women as well. But we all need to support our families, but we also need to know when's enough is enough. And sometimes, maybe if you have your debt under control, you can take a job that pays less, that has better hours. It's not all about making as much money as you possibly can. Sometimes it's keeping your lifestyle in check so you can afford to live off less money, even for a time. So,
yeah. And that's the entrepreneur's curse, right? We want to start our own thing, but it also takes commitment, and we bring in investment money, and it does bring a higher financial stress that maybe is unknown to the person who is an entrepreneur, because they still have financial stress. But once you've done both, you realize that, what you just said is absolutely correct, that maybe making less money but not being owed X amount of dollars to investors is maybe the less stressful route sometimes.
Yeah, there's no question. So let's spend, 5 or 10 minutes, and let's talk about, maybe relating to each of the 5 pillars, what are some things that, like, today I can either do or not do, because there may be some things that I need to stop doing, to put myself kind of moving in the right directions. Again, most people listening to this podcast are not world-class athletes. Most are not going to win national championships in anything, but just moving in the right direction, to being a little bit better today than yesterday, and then a little bit better the next day. So give me a few just actionable items.
Perfect. I have 3 that we start every member with, no matter what their goal is walking in the door. It doesn't matter. Here's things that every human body should do that we can all start today. 1 is drinking half your body weight in water every day. The key is equally throughout the day. So from the time you wake up, maybe you wake up and right away you get 10, 12 ounces in, because your body's been dehydrated for anywhere from 6 to 10 hours. And then from there, 2 to 3 ounces every half an hour or so. That seems like a lot of work. It seems like you're drinking constantly.
And if you keep walking to the bathroom constantly, does that slow down? Do you get used to that?
It does slow down. And that's actually where the 2 to 3 ounces comes from. More saturate into the system and more digest into the muscle and into the bloodstream, versus drinking 10 ounces every hour and a half, and the body's still only using 2 to 4 ounces and then expelling the rest. So
you're saying 2 to 3 ounces an hour.
2 ounces every 30 to 60 minutes, 2 to 3 ounces. Now, of course, you got to do your math on your body weight and what half your body weight is.
Any tips or tricks on kind of how to measure that, or?
So I've got this 32-ounce bottle in my hand that I'm not sure if all of your viewers will be visible or not, but I have a 32-ounce water bottle in my hand. So for me, I drink 4 of these a day.
Okay.
And what I learned was just by having it next to me at all times, I stopped realizing I drink them all. At noon, I know I had 2 of these, but if I look back, I have no idea when I got them in. So it's more of it becomes this subconscious thing. So people that think I can't focus on that every half an hour, it's going to break my work focus, it's going to break up my day. It won't. Have it in front of you. Before you know it, you will start just subconsciously reaching and taking sips throughout the day. And this habit is the first one, and in my opinion, the easiest one that can become cemented in a habit that you never think about again and doesn't get in the way of your future ones.
And tell me a couple of the other benefits of drinking, quote, that much water are for the body.
One, it's oxygen intake.
Okay.
Right. So your hydration goes a lot of ways. So it's oxygen intake, but it's also flushing of things the body doesn't like. So think of it as a river. If your river is constantly expelling things out into the bigger bodies of water, if the river is always dry, nothing's getting carried out. Everything's just sitting in there. So that's one. And two, it's the actual physical one. We breathe in oxygen, but we also get oxygen supply through H2O when we actually get it through our digestive system. So there's 2 different carrier ways to get things in: breathe in your air and drink in your water. We do not move. We don't think. Our energy pathways, nothing works without oxygen consumption.
Perfect.
So
I love it.
And then if you want to add a third, lubrication of muscles, without water, we become very, very frail as a movement pattern. So it's decreasing injury, increasing movement and locomotion. Everything comes when you have more water in you.
Perfect. So that water, that is a 100% doable habit that anybody can start. There's really no barriers to it. So perfect. No excuses.
Yes.
All right. What's number 2?
That's a huge one. Number 2 is movement outside of exercise. And as much as people sound like it's crazy because I own a gym and my first goal isn't to get people in here, but the first goal sometimes is just getting general movement in. Now that can be, and the research I know 10,000 steps became popular at some point. The research says 8,500 steps a day are the ideal, where we start to see lower levels in triglycerides, longer levels in health longevity, and decreasing in other risk of diseases by blood lipid panels. So you could look at that as getting the 8,500 steps in bulks. Maybe you walk your dog in the middle of the day, but it doesn't have to be that. I have a member that does 200 steps an hour. It does not take long to get 200 steps. So for her, she realized that if she goes to the bathroom, goes get a drink of water, and takes the long way around her office, she gets that easily every hour in a few minutes. And it also gets her away from her desk and makes her feel more loose and revitalizes her energy a bit too. But general movement, we cannot allow our body, if our body goes stagnant in movement for long periods of time, so does our brain.
Okay.
If our brain goes stagnant, decision-making to exercise later, to eat better, all of that becomes more challenging.
Okay. So 200 steps an hour, 300 steps an hour, 8,500 steps, little bit of intentionality there, but that's, you're not telling people we got to run 20 miles a day. That again, that seems very doable. Okay.
Absolutely.
So that's 2 easy tips. What's our next tip?
The third one, and this does vary, the amount is going to vary, so I can't give an exact amount, but getting equal, like water, getting equal protein intake in throughout the day. If you use the car analogy, a lot of us are driving our car all day and then putting the gas in later. Now, the only difference between us and a car is the car physically won't let you do that. Our body finds a way to keep moving around without us putting some of the proper gas in the tank. So this is a good nutrition rule in general, getting even consumption throughout the day, but our protein intake tends to take a really big hit, where a lot of us are taking in 20 to 40 grams at night and trace elements in throughout the day. We just can't survive on that. And again, that's going to feed back into energy levels, so being lethargic throughout the day, not moving later. And from a satiety standpoint, protein is not only a building block for every system we have, it's also usually the trigger to hunger. So when people feel hungry, usually it's protein the body's asking for, but then our brain goes, oh, I feel hungry. Maybe my body needs protein, but what I like is that food over there.
Right.
So now we
There's
start
no protein in Doritos, is there? But
maybe very, very little, which also proves there's no real cheese in there too, I guess.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything. Yeah.
But you get the point. If we can do better about getting even consumption in, again, the number is going to vary in terms of what each specific body needs by gender, by weight, by activity level. But If you can find that number, and in general right now, actually don't worry about the number. I tell people I told a group of athletes last night, I said, oh, here's a website that just has a list of proteins on it. It was a generic website I found. I don't know what the website was. Didn't matter though. I like the list. I said, go home, circle the proteins you like, hand the list to your parents because they were high school athletes and they're not doing the grocery shopping, and figure out what's one from each list. You can have one at breakfast, one at lunch, one at dinner. And if you do that, we're off to a good start.
Perfect. Easy stuff, man. I mean, that's just intentionality. And I think when we come to money and when we come to health, people think, I haven't really been exercising. I need to run a marathon next week, or I need to join the hardest CrossFit class, or if I'm not benching 300 pounds by next month, I'm a failure. No, I mean, I think there's some simple tasks that we can take on that just progress us forward. And if we're always moving forward, eventually we're going to reach whatever our potential is, and I'm never going to outrun, Usain Bolt, and that's okay, but I could run a little faster and I could drop a few pounds, be a little bit leaner. So,
I've always loved the comparison to the financial side. I think there's, doing a little bit every day and consistency instead of trying to hit the home runs. I think the comparison is apples to oranges, but not. I think it's closer to apples than people think. But I kind of lost my train of thought. But yes, I've always loved that analogy because I do think it's very, very similar.
Very few people go broke from one bad financial decision.
Yes.
Now, you do go broke from a series of bad financial habits. And if you've ever watched the ESPN 30 for 30 Broke, it was about pro athletes who've literally made hundreds of millions of dollars. Now I would say, hey, if I gave you $100 million now, could you blow it? And you'd say you'd have to be a moron, have to be an idiot to blow that kind of money. I make, a minuscule fraction and I've managed to survive. But you take half for taxes, 10% for agent, 7 Lamborghinis, 4, houses, and then you're taking care of it can go if you're not intentional. Just like the person who's making $8 an hour, it can go. Now, the only difference between the athlete and the $8 an hour person is they have a heck of a lot more fun on the way down to bankruptcy because they had it's more fun driving to bankruptcy in a Lamborghini than it is riding the city bus. But the math is the math,
Well, and again, very similar. It's a lot easy. The path to weight gain is a lot more fun than the path to weight loss, which is why those habits are easier to make. But what I love about habit change, and this is what I was going to say before I lost my train of thought. What I love about habit change more than anything else is the confidence you start seeing in people. Developing a new habit is in and of itself a skill.
Yep.
And what we're missing on is developing that skill. So instead of aiming, and that's also why I started with the 3 bullet points I just gave you. Instead of aiming for working out 6 days a week, instead of aiming for losing 20 pounds in your first month, instead of aiming for saving all of your money for retirement in the first year, right? Get wins. Focus on the stuff that can help you develop a habit. One, you're going to feel like, man, it's a mental confidence. Sure. You start feeling like you have more control.
I hit my 200 steps this hour. That's a win.
That's a win.
That's a win.
And now instead of me saying, well, Mike told me to do this and it would work, so I'm going to listen to Mike. Now I have my own memory of this working. I can pull from my own subconscious, my own memory bank to, I did this, I can do this again. And if you start with small wins, they will trickle and they will multiply. So people it does take a level of patience for sure, but start with small wins, gain them, and then the rest will just start taking care of itself as you go.
What do you think about words? I have, I'm teaching a financial literacy class and I almost had to slap her because I told her several times, we're not going to, and it was all joking, but we're not going to use the word try anymore. It's not, I'm trying to not do this. No, you're either going to not go to Starbucks anymore or you are. Let's not say try. So do you think how we talk to ourselves, both verbally and internally, makes a difference?
100%. And I like what you just said. Another example I have an old client. Now I've used this a few times now, but an old client that when she came in, she had every justification for every action. So we said, we're going to try something new. When you come in and I ask you our normal series of questions about the habits we're working on, you are only allowed to say yes or no. You cannot give me the reason behind why you did it. So did we get our walk in yesterday? No, but what? Nope.
No.
You can't give it. We have to stop at no. And what that did was it forced her to just hear, it's like she heard in her head, because otherwise she didn't hear the no. She heard her justifications again, and it further validated her decision.
And the justification reasons sometimes are even halfway relevant and legitimate, but
they're logical.
Absolutely.
They're logical. I didn't work out because I wanted to spend more time with my kids today instead. Not many
Right.
people in the world are going to crucify me for that.
Mm-hmm. Right.
However, it was
But
still justification, and I probably still could have done both.
could you, especially when your kids are young, could your workout have been going pushing the stroller with your wife and your baby?
These are
Could have
called
been.
solutions. These are called
Absolutely.
creative solutions. There's all,
Absolutely.
and this is what I tell my clients. There is always a way. The hard part isn't, the hard part's finding it. The hard part is finding it for you. I don't know you. I'm trying to get glimpses of your life from a conversation, but I really don't know. If I watched you 24 hours a day for a week, I could probably give you a whole list of advice.
Oh, no question.
But this is where people have to have some ownership on themselves. I'm sure financially is the same thing, of being self-aware of who they are, what their justifications are. And it really takes an honest talk with themselves in the mirror about really what their real limitations are and strengths are before we start attempting to make the first changes.
No question. Now, you're in the Chicago area, and there was a guy that was a halfway decent basketball player with the same first name as you. I don't think he ever said, I'm going to try to see, maybe if I feel like it, I'm going to go to the gym and shoot 1,000 free throws. That's not what he did. It's just, I'm going and I'm going to outwork everybody. And I have this intentionality. And, I don't know Michael Jordan's lifestyle. And, sometimes maybe the people that excel too much, their home life stuffer. But I don't think Michael Jordan ever said the word try or no, but.
No, but you know what he did say? He did say he's failed a lot.
Sure.
And he did say he's missed a ton of shots. And he did say, but it didn't matter. It didn't stop him from trying the next one, because every miss was a lesson.
Yeah.
Instead of using the word failure, it was just another lesson. And I happen to have I don't know him either, not by no means. I met him one time because he used to work out at a very high-end gym I was at in Chicago. But I did have a connection with him, that someone that works with him on the fitness side of things. And she verified that over the years, past the game of basketball, when he puts his mind to something, he just buries himself in it and he focuses. And that's the difference between people that do find success and that don't, is that they don't do anything with half focus or partial focus, or I'll try this here and there. You focus on one thing and you focus heavily on it. And that's where it starts becoming a part of your life.
Not a question. Well, it sounds like you and I we're on the same wavelength on different parts of success and different pillars. And we could probably talk for hours, but I want to hear a little bit about your virtual kind of programs that you have, because not everybody is physically near you. Tell me how you help people on this health and fitness journey.
Yeah, absolutely. When the pandemic hit, I did what a lot of gyms did, and we went virtual in terms of exercise. And, as I watched people, and this became kind of a social experiment for me, I realized that exercise, it wasn't working in terms of people completing it, but two, I realized that wasn't the biggest battle. It really wasn't. And at the time I was just starting my PhD work, and I was doing an independent study on behavior change. So I got really into the neurology of behavior change. And I realized that it's the habits were the bigger thing, and getting into that. So I formed what I called an accountability group with my members. And at first it was a pilot group. We had 10 people in the first group, 22 in the second. And really what it became was just people realizing that they're sharing each other's problems. It became a community group where we shared tactics like the ones we shared today. And we made sure people just stayed aware every week. And what we realized was people started to get better. They started to trickle in certain goals. And the people that were frustrated at week 3 and week 4 because they weren't seeing progress were seeing the success of others. And one success led to the other. So I decided this was going to be our new virtual program. Is exercise a part of it? Yes. I've got hundreds of exercises to pick from and workouts you can do at home. But the bigger focus, because this launches in a few weeks, depending on when you air this, the bigger focus is going to be developing that habit change as a skill set. And then from there, I don't care what your goal is, because we're going to accomplish it, because you're going to be better at achieving new skills. So that's what we focus on in our virtual programs, is the habit change side of health and fitness.
Well, if you don't change habits, anybody can do anything for a week, and then you get off your habits and you slip back. You have the proverbial falling off the wagon. So how does somebody find you? Where can you be found on the internet, and to learn a little bit more about your programs?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually have 3 ways. So I have Mar Health and Performance, MAR healthandperformance.com. I realize it's a mouthful. If I've any regret at my business, it was not condensing down the the website and the email. My Instagram page for the business is @Mar Health and Performance. And to add one, you can also find a lot of my podcast work and my health speaking work on my Instagram, my personal Instagram, which is at lifestyle_podcast.
Perfect. I love it. I believe in living balanced lives, and I believe that health is wealth, and I believe that we need to take care of our entire financial pictures, but our physical pictures, our relationship pictures. So you and I are just on such a good wavelength together that this is all related. Before we call this episode over, I always ask my guests for their definition of true wealth. So I didn't tell you I was going to ask you for this, but to put you on the spot, what is your definition of true wealth?
You did not ask me that, and it's a good question. I've been called financially driven a lot of my life by old bosses, old managers. And now that I've had kids and I've lost my father, my perception has very much so changed. So for me, true wealth is time. I want to have the control in my life that I can coach my kids, that I can see them grow up, but do so in a way that is also financially taking care of them. So for me, my true wealth is my children, but being a part of my children's life in an impactful way, which means for me, finding a ratio between doing what I have to do financially to make sure they are comfortable and don't go through the stresses that I did in life, but making sure that I am in their life in a way that a lot of dads don't get to be.
Absolutely. How old are your kids?
I have 11, 4, and 2.
There you go. Well, I have an 18-year-old that's in college, and I have twin 14-year-olds. So every stage of parenthood is both. You think the next stage is going to be easier, but they're all beautiful. They really are, and they all have some frustration as well, because kids can be demonic at times. But no, I have the best kids in the world, and I wouldn't trade a minute of it. So
no, it's the best thing in the world, and I'm very much so trying to enjoy the moments. I've always been a person that tries to rush to the next thing and looks at the next milestone. So my kids growing up too fast in front of my eyes has been a reminder to me to try to slow things down and be more in the moment when I can be.
No question.
Yeah.
Well, awesome. Well, everybody go to www.marhealthandperformance.com or visit at @marhealthandperformance on Instagram. See if this is something that interests you, but I promise you that you will never, ever regret changing some small habits in your life and in our lives. And small habits, just over time, they compound. And honestly, our habits compound for us or against us. So let's make sure that our habits are moving us in the directions that we want, with our money, with our health, with our relationships, with our spirituality. And that is something that we will never regret. So with that being said, I want to thank Mike Ricchio for being on the podcast, and I wish everybody a blessed week.
Thanks, everyone. David, thank you.
Thank you.